Hello, everybody. Hello. Oh, it's so lovely to join you all at LlewellynCon today. I'm really honoured to be part of such an amazing lineup. Wonderful to see so many people joining us this morning. Well, it's this morning for you. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon for me here in the UK. Yeah. Hello. My name's Danu Forest, and I'm a traditional Celtic wisewoman and banfasser. I work with Druidry and Celtic folk magic for a very long time now, and I've been very delighted to be published by Llewellyn on several occasions now. So I'm absolutely thrilled to join you all today. I'm just making sure that the chat thing is working okay and that I seem to be live and all good. Yeah, well, welcome. Today, I'm here to talk to you about British folk magic. That's something that a lot of people are quite interested in these days. It seems to be having a resurgence all across the Western world, really. And it's something that I've been practicing for a very, very long time. When you kind of come across people like me that are I've walked the path of Druidry, kind of traditional witchcraft, kind of high magic, kind of magician-y kind of things, and more shamanic kind of things. I've basically been a practitioner now for nearly 40 years, and all the way through that has been a central thread for me, which is working with the landscape and working with the spirits as I find them in my daily practice and in the landscape where I live, and of course my ancestral spirits as well. So if over the years the kind of hats that I've worn or how I've defined my practice has evolved and changed, but the continual thread has been how to work with the spirits of my landscape and the spirits that come to me for me to work with. So some of that is the spirits of the land, some of that is ancestors, some of that is the spirits of various magical traditions, and through it all is the thread that I would call folk magic. It's a very huge title, really, and very difficult to define in any fixed way, and that's its beauty. Folk magic is something that's always ultimately applicable. It's a way of working that is practical, is grounded, is available for everybody, no matter where you are. And its beauty is that there's no hierarchy in it. There's no hard and fast rules. It's something that you feel and develop organically over time. So, for instance, I live a few miles from Glastonbury in Somerset, in the rural southwest of England. And this is a very powerful place to live, really. It has an awful lot of ancient settlements and archaeological remains here. There's, of course, all the kind of myths and legends and ley lines and things related to Glastonbury and Glastonbury Tor and things like that. But it also has a very deep, old thread of folk magic here. Practitioners that knew nothing about and would not be remotely connected to all the kind of Glastonbury kind of modern New Age buzz, and would be much more related to folk magic traditions that go back centuries. And the other thread that's the main thread of my work is my ancestral threads. So some of my family is from the Midlands and from the north of England, and the other side of my family is Irish, and I work an awful lot with my ancestors and ancestral spirits. So for me, my folk magic is a blend of things that is situated in my life and makes sense from where I am sitting. And if I can pass on one thing today for how you could learn folk magic or develop your folk magic practice if you're already well and truly on the road, is to situate it very much in your life and where you are and who you are at this point in your life, and who your ancestors are and things like that. So it comes down to, for me, having a really present and connected sense of your life situated on the land and your life situated in a continuum of spirits from the distant past to the distant future. When I do ancestral healing, for example, in folk magic, I feel like I'm attending to the spirits of my ancestors, for example, but I feel like I'm also doing that work for the good of future generations. That sort of thing's very important to me. So historically speaking, what do I mean when I'm talking folk magic? One of the things about me, I don't know how many of you will be familiar with my work, but I have quite a strong bookish side, and later on in life I've returned to university, so I'm halfway through a PhD in Celtic studies, and I'm focusing on the fairy faith and cunning folk and their relationship to the landscape. So this session today is bang straight on my particular area of passion. And historically speaking, in the British Isles, we've had a really long-standing tradition of folk magic practitioners going back centuries and centuries and centuries. And these weren't the learned people, they weren't the upper classes, they were wise women, healers, cunning folk, fairy doctors. And they occupied a kind of a liminal in-between kind of life from the kind of Christian society. And the connection to the spirits of their landscapes. Often some of these characters would be Christian as well as magical practitioners, and they held these things together. So they would have, if you asked them, they would say they were a Christian, but when they practiced their magic, they would often be contacting, for example, the fairies, or in Ireland, the She, to inform their practice. Or they would be perhaps drawing on European magic and European grimoires and things like this to call up spirits and demons and things like this from things like sort of the Key of Solomon and stuff like that. So every single practitioner that you would find historically and every single practitioner that you'll find now will be their own unique blend of many, many, many different forces, many different influences. I don't tend to use sort of high magic kind of techniques in how I work, and I don't really use Christianity, but other folk magic practitioners will maybe integrate psalms and prayers into their work, whereas I tend to focus much more animistically on the spirits of the landscape and the spirits that I encounter. So, historically, we know an awful lot about this kind of stuff from things like the Scottish witch trials, where a lot of cunning folk and folk magic practitioners basically gave testimony in the court trials for how they practiced. And it's astonishing the breadth and the longevity of certain practices over centuries that were surviving and being repeated by generation after generation of magical practitioners, despite often they not being the most powerful people in society. They were often very poor. They were the healers, the magical workers of their villages. So they weren't people of great influence, really, other than in a very local sphere. Sort of other famous ones would be perhaps the witch Isabel Gowdy in Scotland, and Biddy Early, who's a particular favourite of mine in Ireland. She's a little bit later than Isabel Gowdy. She's kind of late 18th, early 19th century. And she worked with the fairies a lot and the spirits of the dead. So that brings me to, where do you get your magic from if you're practicing folk magic? And I think, as I've mentioned a couple of times now, key to that is our relationship to the landscape that we're in. Now, I live in a very rural area now, but I've lived in cities when I was a younger woman, and I know for a fact that if you put time in, you will find energy spots, you'll find ancestral places, you'll find power places anywhere on this earth. So you have to be really building a relationship with your landscape, first and foremost, and a relationship with the spirits that you encounter in your life, whether it be ancestral spirits, nature spirits in the land around you, things like water sources, holy wells, spirits of rivers, things like that are very, very important, and can be found anywhere. So key to our magic as folk magic practitioners is to build a relationship with these places through knowing our land, knowing what grows there, knowing what the energies are like in various parts of our landscapes, and building that relationship over time, often through making offerings. I like to weave in an awful lot of the fairy faith into how I work, so I place out bowls of milk often. I like to, when I go to bed, leave a bowl of water on my kitchen table, and this is a traditional one for the fairy faith. to give them good hospitality. Now, it's not to say that these spirits are safe or friendly or easy to work with or any of those things. I know there's an awful lot of fear about fairy folk, and rightly so. What I'm saying is that I build over time good relationships with some spirits that could be described as fairies or the sheep, some of them. And I pay attention by being very present, by listening to my own guidance, by listening to the messages that I get from them, and by listening to tradition and putting it all together and becoming over time somebody who's experienced in sensing this is a good spirit to work with, this is not a good spirit to work with, having good boundaries and protection from the ones that aren't, and welcoming and working with the ones that are. So again, it brings me down to being really, really present and developing that inner connection and that inner sense. A lot of people would call it the second sight, particularly in the Celtic traditions. And anyone can get a certain sense, a felt sense of the spirits over time with practice, but it does take a lot of time for some people. I've seen spirits my whole life. But others, it doesn't come that quickly, but you might find that you feel something, or you smell something, or you get a flash in your mind. So just remember that your wider senses can work with you to develop psychic abilities and things like that. Each in their own way. Everybody's different. There isn't, again, no hard and fast rules. Be present on the land, tune in, be patient, be observant. So one of the things I do working with folk magic is to draw in my connection with that land and draw in energy and strength from my landscape and build positive relationships with helpful spirits, and use my work with helpful spirits and my knowledge of my landscape to protect me from less helpful spirits. So there's a lot of work with boundaries and being careful and being aware. What you'll find with British folk magic in particular is a huge array of protection magic. So many things are considered protective, or help you mediate that relationship between yourself and the spirits. So a key thing that you'll find a lot with folk magic, and this is why I thought I'd do a little bit of show and tell very briefly, is iron. This is one of my iron horseshoes, and iron horseshoes, and any iron in particular, is used to protect your boundaries. The history of use for iron in magic goes back centuries and centuries and centuries. And what I experience it doing when I work with it is that it drops energy out, it earths things very, very, very solidly, and it cuts energetic threads very, very clearly. So that's why you'll find a lot of the time in farmhouses and old buildings across the UK and in Scotland and Ireland and Wales, you might find horseshoes and Cornwall. You might find horseshoes. Sometimes they're down, sometimes they're up. I prefer this way. This, however, is something that I will use this way down to cut energetic connections between people when they need healing. So I might go through their energy field and draw illness down into the earth, things like that. And this way up is to hold good luck, folklorically. And I find that it really does. It just holds the energy and guards the door really, really well. I also place a horseshoe over my hearth at home, because hearths and liminal spaces are all traditionally places where spirits come in, and you want to have control over who comes in and who doesn't. Another key item is a hagstone. I've got loads. This one I want to show you because it's one of my favourites, because it's kind of like a heart as well. But you find these a lot at rivers and beaches and things like that. Hagstones, they have to be naturally formed holes all the way through the stone. And if they're not, if they're drilled, it doesn't work in the same way at all. A key bit of key spell. This is a folklore key spell. This is also for protection. This is a very old iron key from a church door. Now, again, I don't really use Christianity, but it is the door that protects the sacred space. And that is why I find it magical use for me in my practice. So a very old way of working is to tie an iron key specifically from a church door or from some other guarding and protecting kind of door. So it could be a door to a front door to a house or anything like that. And you tie it with a hagstone and you use the colour red. You find the colour red a lot in folk magic as something which wards off negative energies and wards off evil spirits and unhelpful fairies and things like that. So yes, a hagstone and a key is another thing that you'll find an awful lot in a folk practitioner's house and a way of working. Another use of the colour red is rowan cross. Now, rowan wood from the rowan tree is particularly favoured in folk magic as something, again, which will help mediate your work with the spirits. It's highly protective, but it's also something which will help you be more aware of the spirits. The magical properties of rowan help with psychic vision and an awareness of your boundaries. So working with rowan will help you know what's about and protect you more by knowing what's about. What kind of spirits are around you, helpful spirits, unhelpful spirits. And a traditional way to work with it is to tie 2 sticks of rowan wood together with red thread. And this is traditionally hung over doorways, windows, barn doors to protect livestock, all sorts of things like that. And it's very easy to work with. Rowan is a very friendly and helpful tree spirit. Yes, and tied together with red thread at the centre. Some people will make a crucifix. I tend to not make a crucifix. And I've tied a few charms here. This is one that I've had for a while in my car. So, yes. Other useful things in folk magic. One of the things I like to work with is a fishing weight. Now, these are used in the way I work for scrying, but also as spirit houses. One thing you want to do is to welcome good spirits and to banish unwelcome spirits or to trap them. Now, this I use as a home for helpful spirits, and I use it for scrying, but I use it for scrying by letting my eyes rest in it and using it as a way to communicate with the spirits that like hanging around it and inside it. They're not trapped in it, but they like to communicate with me through this. Fishing weights and glass balls like this have been used in British folk magic for centuries. One thing I like as well is a technique that they use to make spirit traps, and I've done this a few times. You know, but it's a bit of a modern adaptation for this. They're kind of little Christmas baubles you can get for hanging on trees that you can fill with things, filling them with needles or with hundreds and thousands little kind of candy sweets. So there's thousands and thousands and thousands of multicolored little candy balls. Using those as spirit traps is a really interesting modern development on the use of fishing weights. It's the same kind of principle, but the idea is that a spirit, an unwelcome spirit, will be drawn to the colourful things inside and will spend all day or potentially forever trying to count them, and thus not bothering you. Another powerful and important part of folk magic is, of course, witch bottles. Sometimes they use Bellarmine jars historically, which are a very old kind of type of jar that was popular a few hundred years ago. This is one of mine. I use glass ones often, but this is one that I place on my altar a lot. And again, it's used to protect from bad spirits and draw in good ones. So in this, I will have a lot of rowan berries and salt and some iron again, and protective and supportive herbs like St. John's wort and vervain and things like that. And you can obviously make all sorts of spells with jars. It's a bit like charm bags or whatever, just in a containment in a different way. But I think something about having the face on the jar as well kind of animates it, so that we're working with the spirit of the jar as well. It's kind of given expression. The spell is given expression by the face on the jar, is in my experience. And all of these things, when I work with them, when I work with the rowan tree, when I work with the hagstone, I treat all of them like they are spirits. There are indwelling spirits that I work with and build relationship with and have gratitude towards for their support. Another type of work I'm really keen to work with is animal spirits and shape-shifting and spirit flight. And this, if you can see clearly, this is the skin of an adder which came my way. And I work with snake energy quite a lot sometimes. I had snakes when I was a child, but I don't at the moment. To help with shape-shifting and transforming. And this is another beloved ally of mine. And I just have herbs as an offering in there. And yes, I think I wanted to just mention a few final little things, like protective herbs. In the garden at the moment at my house, I've got lots of St. John's wort that's just in blossom and in bloom. And this is one of the most protective and powerful herbs for the summer solstice, which is just coming up. And yeah, the ways you can work with St. John's wort in spell bags and charm bags and, witch bottles. And I really like one old protective charm is to, when out traveling, is to place this in your armpit. I find that really interesting because I wonder if there's a herbal kind of energetic thing about working with your armpits and your lymph nodes and things like this. A lot of the plants I grow in my garden, this is yarrow. Yarrow is really good because it helps you grow stronger while protecting you. And I think that's a really useful, important detail, is that if you know what's around you with the help of the Rowan, and if you have a good, strong connection with the spirits and your own life force is strong, then you won't need too much protection. And then you've got spare to help others, of course. So, yeah, there's barely time to kind of cover even a millionth of folk magic in such a small amount of time. But I just wanted to show you some of my favourite things that I work with, things that I work with a lot. Just so that you feel that you can maybe go away and try something yourself, or just have a sense that you've seen something in the real world. An important detail, I think, is perhaps to just, before I kind of take on any questions or anything, is to just also say, what I'm working with here is quite site specific. And you can find other plants, if you can't get these ones where you are. You can find power places and places on your landscape that are just as powerful as anything that I will find. But we do need to be aware in the modern day that if we buy equipment, we buy, I found that adder skin. But if you buy things online, make sure you get them from ethical places. And if you use things from cultures and communities that aren't your own, to honour that and be mindful of what you're doing. Everybody's context is different. So again, part of that being present and having good connection with the spirits comes down to being ethical as well in modern terms. We're not working hundreds of years ago, we're working here and now, and we have to be aware of the challenges. So do feel that you can adapt this work, but also be aware of its roots. And in its roots is great power and great opportunities for learning and for growth. And I feel that what this work can do is actually, it's got a genuine spiritual element to it that comes from an animistic worldview of seeing that you're part of something so much greater than yourself. And there is real power in that. There is power in that, but there's growth in yourself in that. And I want to just encourage all of you to learn your landscapes, learn the things that grow around you that are protective or supportive or curative, that banish and ward. Become present enough to pick up on the energies where you live and adapt ways of magic that have worked for other people to work for you, and then pass it on with a spirit of generosity, respect for the past and generosity to the future. So we have got only a very, very small amount of time. So I'm just wondering if there's any questions or anything like that before I close in the last 5 minutes. I wish I could talk to you all day. I feel like I've barely opened the subject. Just scrolling through. I don't know. Do we have any questions? Well, if we don't, then maybe I'll just show you a few other little bits and pieces that I've got. A favourite thing of mine at the minute that I'm using to harvest my herbs is my iron sickle. And again, I use this quite a lot to bring the energies of the plants with me. Sometimes I use copper and bronze, but working with iron in this way really gathers the energies forward for me. So yeah, well,
Danu, we do have a
Yes,
couple of questions. I'm not sure if you're seeing the chat.
I am seeing the chat. I just can't quite find them. Can you
Okay,
pass
we've
them
got,
on to me?
yes, absolutely. Question. You mentioned finding power spots within the landscape.
Mm,
Would you give us some ways to find these?
okay. Well, wherever you are, I'm going to base this in an example from, say, central London. Okay, because that's a big, big, big city that I'm more familiar with. Uh, Wherever you are, there will be rivers, there will be water sources, there will be places that were of significance to previous generations, whether they be churchyards and churches, archaeological sites, perhaps places that were sacred to people who were there before, previous civilizations or generations. So look at maps, understand the landscape underneath all the built up modern world. And go looking for the rivers, go looking for the water sources, go looking for the oldest churchyards, go looking for um, perhaps the oldest tree in the park. Go looking for places that are perhaps that just have an energy, a vibe. Um, there's a huge layer after layer after layer of history in somewhere like London, but you'll find it anywhere. Little places that maybe nobody else has even spotted, but will just have a certain energy. So if you can't do anything else, take some time regularly to slowly and really presently walk your landscape and understand where it is as a place on earth rather than as modern civilization in 2025, as a place on earth, and feel what it's like in different areas in your body. Bring all of this down to your body. You might get flashes, you might see spirits, you might have all of those things, but the thing that tells you this is good, this isn't good, will be in your body somewhere. So walk the land and slow down to it and try to just notice it. Um, and that way you'll find somewhere, even in the most built up places, you will find power spots to visit often, to make relationships with. One of the best offerings we can do these days for building relationships with power places is to clean up rubbish, is to look after the environment around that place or wherever we are. These things act as offerings, and the spirits recognize those of us that are trying to be good for the earth and help us. So, yeah, wherever you are, you can do it, but you need to do your homework and you need to walk the land. Okay, is there any other questions?
Absolutely. We have one. What would you recommend for someone who has fallen out of practice of working with fairies? How would one be able to rebuild that relationship and apologize?
Oh, oh, okay. First off, apologize. Um, offerings again, offerings again, and really, really a long, hard look at yourself as to what has happened, what has gone wrong in that relationship. Okay, there's no point apologizing and trying to rebuild a relationship with the fairies if you have really angered them and you're not prepared to do something different. And it may be, depending on what it is that you did wrong, and it may be that depending on who the fairies are, what attitude they've got towards you, I make no guarantees at all about whether or not you can re-establish those relationships. Um, you can protect yourself again with iron, with St. John's wort, with things like that. Um, but your best protection is good conduct. That's your best protection. Is always to honour the spirits, treat them with respect. But at the end of the day, you are entitled to have boundaries and to have a peaceful night's sleep in your own home. So uh, whatever your relationship is with the fairies, you can protect your space. But I would say make lots of offerings. I would ask the good spirits to come forward to work in your favour and to intercede on your behalf. It would be a very, very complex work. It might take a very long time. It may or may not be successful depending on what you've done. Um, yeah, yeah. They are. I'm not a fan of all fairies are scary and bad, and I'm certainly not a fan of all fairies are light winged, new age, helpful things. They are neither. They are their own spirit beings. They are the spirit nations of Ireland and the British Isles, and they are found elsewhere as well in similar forms. But just as I wouldn't say oh, go over to France and everybody in France is really friendly or isn't, or anything like that. It's the same with the fairies. These are the spirit king. These are the good neighbours if we are good neighbours to them. So you have to walk wisely and carefully, um, looking after yourself and being conscious of your own behaviour and hope for the best. But, you know, there are good spirits out there that can intercede for you, but every case is different. I don't know if that's helpful or not. It really, that's a biggie. That is a really big thing to ask. Okay. Is there any other questions?
I think we have time for one last question. Sver was asking about your book and when it was going to be available.
Ah, yes. This is my latest book. Oh, it's reflecting the light from the screen. Here you go. I am so delighted with this, the Cunning Folks book, Cottage Witchcraft. It's got a lot of my personal practice here in my life here in the southwest of England. So it's got a lot of folk magic, traditional things, and how I work now, here and now. And I've really enjoyed working on it. It's been a delight to work with Llewellyn for it as well. Yes, it's just about out now in the States, I believe, and it's out at the beginning of July in the UK, and I imagine somewhere in between or something similar for other parts of the world. So thank you so much for taking an interest and spending this time with me. I feel like I could talk for hours on this subject, and I've barely touched it, but it's been a real delight to join you all.